characters.
Wow, I did not know that. I guess, how does AI do that? Does it just have the infinite ability to try things?
It's the same reason that your credit card keeps getting hacked. You just like they just plug in numbers and it just runs until it's something clicks. It's
Oh
wild.
my God. Wow. That is
Yeah.
Well,
out of control. Wow.
just
Yeah.
one more thing to be stressed about.
Yeah. So you
Or
Exactly.
need a
anxious about.
physical there's these USB things that you just clip on your keychain. I haven't bought one yet, but you could just like stick the USB passkey in instead of using your phone or whatever. I don't mind the phone.
Wow. Hmm.
Crazy.
AI, all the ways
I
it's
just
going to
want a
change
high
our lives.
altitude EMP.
Do you?
Can we get
Wouldn't
that?
that
Yeah.
take out everything though?
For good. Yeah. Send us back to the 17th century. Yeah, it'd be great.
I've had fantasies about that myself. I won't lie. I mean, it's kind of sounding a bit Ted Kaczynski here, but it's I've had fantasies about that. I don't know. Well,
I mean,
welcome.
apart from the whole hundreds of millions of people dying because they can't get their medical equipment, I mean,
Yeah, other than that,
sure would
we
make us appreciate stuff a lot quicker.
yeah. Yeah, if we could like dial it back gradually, wean us off of modern times, maybe that would be good, but I don't see that happening.
No.
Hello, everybody. It is Monday, March 23rd. I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce. I'm here with Christine Siefenwalk, Jennifer Friend, and today we have Jake Wiskerchen with us. And I hope I said your last name right, Jake, unlike
Yeah,
your
it was
state of
Chris.
Nevada.
It was Christine's last name. I wasn't sure how to pronounce, so I'm glad you got her in there too.
Yeah. Well, Jake is a therapist who runs a group practice in Nevada, sorry. And I'll keep on doing that. Um, and he's an awesome guy, has a lot of there's so many things that we could talk with Jake about. It really is endless. But I was hoping we could touch a little bit on some of the alienation between men and women in relationships, because that's been such a huge topic for so many people with the declining birth rate and the drop in marriage, the raise in divorce is it's just it is a big deal in our culture. And I know Jake probably has some really good insights on that. Also, we could talk about guns and mental health. We have lots of potential discussion, and guns and mental health. There it is. That's
Oh,
cool.
wow.
And the veteran community, the armed forces community, mental health. I think that Jake has a lot of insight into those populations. And hello, everybody. Nice to see you guys. Mr. Morning Trek, Student of Rhythm, Riff Rock, Jay Guy is, David LeBoy. Nice to see you guys. Jay Bourne. And I guess I should I'm sorry, I got disoriented. I got a text right now from somebody about the show, and then it made my brain go in too many different directions. Sorry, I can't respond to that right now. But I want to just quickly introduce Solid Ground for anybody who has not been with us before. We are a peer support community for those concerned about the imposition of authoritarian ideologies in their workplace, university, school, kids' school, community, and the impact that these ideologies have had or are having on their relationships. If you want more information about joining us, you can go to our Substack. It is at Solid Ground Support on Substack. So check us out there, and you can subscribe and join our groups, including the one that we do immediately following the live stream. We go off the record. Usually our guests can stay with us, and we continue the conversation, inviting our members in for a more thorough discussion. So hope to see you guys there. And that was a really awkward preamble. Somebody called me the word salad lady once, and so I'm living up to my reputation right now. Uh, Jake, what is percolating for you as we're kind of getting started here?
What's percolating for me is I was actually just going to subscribe here to your Substack because I didn't realize that was a thing, but now it will be a thing. Um, it's funny you're reminding me of this. I many years ago I was a big listener of sports talk. Dan Patrick, Dan Levitard, Jim Rome, like all the famous people we all know. But Dan Patrick at one point had this thing. He'd often go off script away from sports a little bit, and he'd talk about how he would meet a celebrity of some sort, usually a musician, And the musician would only want to talk about sports, and Dan would only want to talk about music, and neither one of them wanted to talk about their own domains of expertise. And so it was this very awkward conversation. Here I am, you brought me on to talk about this thing, and then I'm like, no, actually, I want to hear more about how you guys deal with this, like, imposition of authoritarian values or structures in common settings. Because from my view, I am battling this. It's very, very much front and center on a lot of the work I do. But what I'm finding is that trying to talk to the people who are in it is like it's like asking the fish out of the water, right? It's like they don't know that they're in it, and so you sound like a crazy person sometimes saying, "Hey, do you ever bother to think that maybe you don't have to do that thing that they asked you to do?" So I'm actually curious to hear what y'all have to say on that angle and how we're battling this. But I'm more than happy to discuss some of this stuff. One thing that popped into my head while you were talking there in the intro is Danny Sulikowski. I don't know if you're connected with
Yeah.
her. Yeah, yeah.
No,
One of the things that's contributing to our male female, I guess, I don't know, chasm, conflict, separation, tension is that intersexual competition that she discusses. I think that's a larger than appreciated influence at this point. Not to mention just the overall cluster beification of society, where we're all becoming little narcissists and we all just want to go be the best me I can be, and you do you. And it's like, no, we really need to take inventory of what our lives involve regarding interdependence on people and not just this whole independent motif. So there's a lot to discuss. I'm kind of rambling there, but I'm excited to be here.
no, that's not rambling. I think that's great. That's a lot of interesting stuff. Danny Sulikowski is fascinating. We've had her on a couple of times for this live stream, and she has a very interesting theory. I'm still sort of digesting it, honestly. I think parts of it resonate with me, parts of it don't. I think that there's this, it seems like it, it's just like with pornography. You can start talking about how men are wrong for consuming porn. You can start talking about how women are wrong for doing porn and doing OnlyFans and stuff. But what's really happening is this interconnected exploitation of the other. So both are exploiting both themselves and the other in this process. And I think similarly with her theory of intersexual competition, it's really easy to just turn the focus on how women are screwing everything up. Just like for years and years, we've looked at how men are screwing everything up. We had this whole like revolt against the patriarchy. And I think it's really easy to look at one thing in isolation and see all the problems with it. But then you kind of miss just like you said about how interdependent and interconnected we all are. And my own pet theory on this is that it's more a result of the centralization of power and bureaucratization of power, which emasculates men because it leaves power and authority and autonomy in the hands, sovereignty, if you will, in the hands of only a few people out there. And men have a strong drive for that, to be able to build, create, master. And when men are robbed of their ability to find purpose and mastery, they become sort of emasculated, beta, whatever you want to say. You also have this bureaucracy gives a lot of petty power to women. It gives a lot of that petty managerial power to women. And then there's its own sort of cycle that happens there with how women wield power over others and tend to micromanage both men and women. But I think the sickness at the heart of it is the centralization of power, the bureaucratization of society, not, oh, we gave women too much power, or there's the patriarchy. I think it's more both of those um are a result of that central thing.
I mean, you're right. It's power without accountability, I guess, or maybe authority without responsibility, something like that. The Man, there's a lot to dive into here. 'Cause I want to go super psychodynamic on this, and that's not like some character from a Marvel movie. It's super psychodynamic, man. Um, but when you talk about the centralization of power, revoking people's ability to create and take charge and do things and be accountable and lead, and and shepherd in the next generation with actual responsibility and buy-in. It's yes, it's masculine, right? Okay, so the feminine tends to centralize power in a very classic devouring mother type of way. But here's the thing: if you look into good, deep psychodynamic studies from the Carl Jungs of the world, you'll find that every human being possesses both masculine and feminine traits. And so what you do is when you emasculate something, you're emasculating everybody. So it's not that women don't have masculine features. They absolutely do, and they crave to express and explore those as well. And what I'm seeing is not only the centralization of power and the bureaucratization of everything, which is exactly on, I mean, nail on, like hammer on nail head is that's great. I never really considered that. But here's what else is happening, and this is pertinent to my world, our world of therapy. It's the outsourcing of responsibility. So what we have done in schools, for example, is we've outsourced education. Used to be in the home, now it's in the schools. Okay, fine, that's fine. We can outsource our education, but then the education turns into everything under the sun. And pretty soon we've outsourced our parenting. We've outsourced our healthcare now. There's school-based healthcare, right? We're outsourcing our discipline for our children. And it's not just the discipline in the form of behavioral modification, but also actually disciplining oneself to study, to focus, to gain, to a- achieve great things on one's own, accord. And in my office, and this is going to sound very extreme, and I intend it as such because I want to set the tone. I have actually, in the recent weeks, this is very, very recent. I do a lot of, just for backdrop, I do a lot of things that are a little unorthodox to the profession, so it's probably why I'm a good fit for the show. But one of these things that just hit me in between the eyes the other day was I said, I don't think that counseling should be treating children. Like, full stop. Now we'll hover there and then let that sink in. And then I'll say, okay, we know there's exceptions to this rule. Some of them might include older teenagers who are capable of developing on their own, and we don't need the parents in the room because the parents are boorish and they're not going to change anyway. Fine. There's also foster children who get passed from home to home, and we can work with the children to become more resilient or insightful or whatnot. That's fine too. But those are tail end of the distribution curve examples. On the whole, I don't believe that my profession should be treating children, and we definitely shouldn't be treating them in a vacuum. So, for example, Zephyr Wellness, which is this company I operate and own up here in Northern Nevada, we have a disclaimer on the intake form that says we don't do fix my kid. And it doesn't read like that. It's like, it reads more like, as the executives of your home, we require you to attend sessions. If you don't, we reserve the right to terminate services because as family systems thinkers, we know that children cannot develop on their own. We're not going to wave some magic wand and send them back into the jacked up atmosphere that produced their bad behaviors or whatever, right? Okay, so most parents get on board with that, but now I've evolved to the point where I go, I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't even want the appearance of representing that I can solve a child's issues. I want the parents to take full centered accountability for that. So alongside this bureaucratization, which I would include, healthcare broadly, the centralization of power, the downstream dogmatic imposition of authority. I think we also have, and it's very paradoxical if you think about this, we have an atomization of personal accountability where we're blame shifting, offsetting accountability, telling everybody that it's not me, it's the system, or it's my Sagittarius acting up, or whatever the hell you want to pick. And therefore, at the center of it, I don't have to do anything. I can just pick up my phone and dive into my own little world of distraction, separating myself from all human beings. And oh, by the way, on that phone is everything that tantalizes my brain and stimulates me and gives me cause to continue scrolling while never actually setting foot in reality, let alone taking accountability. So I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't have to own up to my mistakes. I don't have to center myself in somebody else's life, like my children, and tell them how to live, especially if I'm too afraid to look at my own self. So as a result, if we don't have vulnerability, we don't have intimacy. If we don't have intimacy, we don't have interpersonal connection. If we don't have interpersonal connection, society falls apart. And yet our brains don't really know any different because they keep getting the same, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine hits that would normally accompany real life interactions. So I think it's a big problem. We've got authority structures that are keeping this in place because they stand to make money and exert power and control over society. We've got compliant humans who seemingly are okay with it because we're all just fat, dumb, and happy with our streaming services and our on-demand delivery, from DoorDash or whatever. So we don't actually have to make any effort to do anything. And the result that I'm seeing, to bring this all back home, is we've got grad schools producing graduates who don't want to work, and when they do want to work, they want exorbitant gobs of money to do it, and they are woefully incompetent. I mean, I've seen a cliff drop of competence coming out of graduate schools in therapy land, which is the worst theme park in America, by the way, for the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, just like absolute cliff drop. You can't ask them what their preferred modality is and get an answer because they just don't know because they haven't studied it.
Mhm.
Because the schools aren't holding them accountable because accountability is not a thing, right? So everything's falling apart and everything sucks, and I don't know what we're going to do about it. And that concludes our podcast. Thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll be quiet for a minute and let Christine and Jennifer chime
I was
in.
thinking that, part of the reason why postgraduate students are having difficulty articulating their preferred modality is because the schools have become less about teaching actual clinical skills that are applicable and more about trying to indoctrinate students into ideology and turn them into activists, and that you're going to change society to make it, less patriarchal and racist through through your clients who do not come in with that expectation or desire, but you've sort of decided in a stealth way that that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, well, uh, society's the blame for all my ills, right? So
That's
I
right.
have to change society. Problem with that is that
Sure.
there's no real articulable goal. And if I don't even know how to, like, as Jordan Peterson says, make my own bed, it's going to be really
Make your
hard to,
own bed. That's
save the
right.
world.
Set your life in perfect order before you criticize the world. Yeah.
I want to just comment on what you said about working with or kids being in counseling, because I've really struggled with this a lot back and forth. I did a majority of my internship hours many years ago with kids, and I loved it. And I saw, some growth and some fulfillment there. But the number one issue I had, and when I went off to practice on my own after becoming licensed, the one major issue I had is that the parents oftentimes, or the guardians, the legal guardians, oftentimes were not involved.
Right.
So it did not feel useful to have an hour with these kids, and the younger ones. I think you mentioned, the adolescents and later adolescents probably don't need that as much, but these younger kids that have this 1 hour a week, if that, I mean, for however many months, they didn't stay long oftentimes, especially because I was working at schools. Um, and without the parents' involvement and without the guardian's involvement, no change really was going to happen. I mean, no change was going to happen in the dynamic of the family. And that was really what was causing a lot of them to have such issues. Is their family dynamic was a disaster. It was completely dysfunctional. It was completely absent. I mean, there was, just between negligence and abuse and substance abuse in the family. I mean, there was so much that it just didn't seem like we were doing anything that was going to make a big difference in any way because the family wasn't involved. And that's where I stopped actually seeing anybody under 18
Yeah.
when I went off on my own, because I had a real hard time with the parents and the family not being included, or it's not that they weren't included, it's that they either refused to, or they didn't have the time because they were working 2 and 3 jobs, or whatever the case may be. There's all these reasons for it, but them not being involved was not going to make a difference in the long term for that child. That's just something that I had always wrestled with, which is why I stopped seeing kids in practice. I taught treatment of children and adolescent courses, but I just was unwilling to have them as clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can absolutely influence the life of a child, right? But there's 168 hours in the week, and even if they come weekly, that means there's somewhere else they are 167. So now add to that, you've got this incompetent crop of people leaving graduate school, ostensibly becoming licensed to become therapists, and they are incapable because they're disempowered, and they're disempowered because they haven't been taught, and they haven't been taught because they haven't been challenged, because grad schools overwhelmingly now have adopted this postmodern heuristic of if something is uncomfortable, it is therefore harmful, right? So if I'm going to challenge you, I have to push you into discomfort because you got to challenge whatever you're thinking, and that's uncomfortable. And you might have to step into something unknown, and the unknown is scary and unpredictable. But if I've been taught that anything that seems uncomfortable is therefore painful, and painful is harmful, and harmful is
Mhm.
unethical, then we just won't go there, right?
Yeah.
So what you got is a crop of people becoming therapists who won't challenge their patients.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that is literally exactly what they cleared their throat and raised their hands and signed the consent form to come in to do. We should do it in a polite, compassionate, comfortable way where it's safe to challenge worldviews and ideas and beliefs and whatnot. But what they're doing is they're coming out of school, getting their licenses, and going in not to challenge the patient's beliefs based on what the patient thinks. They're challenging the patients to adopt their centralized religion of sorts.
Mhm.
Call it woke, call it postmodern deconstructionism, call it whatever you want to call it. But the point is, it's this top-down authoritarian approach, and it's not a nice back and forth where we can hold space for the discomfort. That's actual therapy. Going deep and challenging somebody's belief systems that heretofore had not been working, because otherwise, if they were working, they wouldn't be in front of you. It's an indoctrination. It's a lecturing.
Mhm.
It's a sanctimonious condescension of adopt my way of thinking or you're not good, right? So now imagine that therapist walking into a session where the parent has Timmy the 9-year-old or Susie the 10-year-old, so it's Timmy and Susie, right? And they say,
Yes.
they're acting out, or they won't follow instructions, or he's not doing his homework, or she's vaping in the hallway with her friends at 10 years old. Yes, that's a thing, listening audience, if your ears are burning. And I'm supposed to, as the weak, underpowered therapist, I'm supposed to challenge these parents on their
Yeah.
long held, firmly entrenched beliefs? No, no chance. It's never going to happen because I myself have not been pushed into discomfort to know that I can tolerate it. My distress tolerance is in the tank. So there's no chance I can push somebody else into distress for the purpose of growth because I can't watch them in it. I mean, if the audience is unfamiliar with this concept, we see it a lot where in group settings, we'll be doing group therapy, for example, and we'll be processing, and starts to get deep, and somebody gets tearful maybe, and almost immediately hands go out on the thigh, or somebody reaches for the Kleenex box, and it's not about helping the person in the place of distress. It's about me wanting to pull them out of it because I don't
Yes.
want to watch you there, right? Because I can't tolerate my own distress. So imagine a
Yes.
whole entire crops of therapists coming out of school these days who don't know how to tolerate their own distress and are expected to challenge. It's never going to happen. So of course
Yes.
we're not going to challenge the families, and we end up with this breakdown. So if I just say don't treat the kids, it's going to compel us to treat the parents, and then you're having a real adult to adult conversation. But if I'm treating a kid, man, I can treat a kid for ages and ages and ages. It's fun playing with Play-Doh, right? It's
All
fun doing
right.
little marker things, and as long as the insurance companies aren't asking, or scrutinizing too closely, it can just look like I'm working forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so glad you brought this up, and I really appreciate what all of you have said about this. It's something that I was a parent long before I went to graduate school to study counseling, and so I had the maybe a different perspective from some of the people who were in that, definitely a different perspective from some in the program. What I saw in my counseling program were a lot of people who were driven to work with kids. That was their purpose for being there. I want to work with kids. I heard that over and over from mostly childless women. And so there's this drive to want to work with kids, but they're seeing the kid as this poor, marginalized victim that they want to come in, swoop in and save. And I think of well, several issues around that. One, and I don't know if this is significant or not, but I don't know about you guys. I never really was somebody who would just say, I like kids. I love my kids. And they have, as I get to know their friends and I see the children of my friends, and as I get to know them as people, there are some kids that I really like a lot. There's some kids that I really don't like very much. I mean, they're people. I don't have some kind of warm, fuzzy schema when I think of kids. And so I think it's interesting that there is a group of people who just see kids. And I wonder what their schema is, that I want to go work with kids. What are they seeing in their mind when they think that? And two other points that I thought of as you guys were talking. So we all know the helicopter parent is a bad idea. We talked about that for at least 20 years. We've been talking about how bad it is to helicopter your children. And there's the scene where the little kid cries, falls down and cries. And we all know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to wait, not overreact, let them pick themselves up, and then say something like, wow, you brushed that off. Good job. Keep going. It's something supportive and uplifting rather than to emphasize the pain or emphasize the access. So we all know that. But what about the helicopter therapist? Because when your kid is sitting with a therapist, that's all they're getting is they're getting like an hour-long helicopter session of every micromanaging, every micro experience, micro emotional experience that's going on is being amplified. I agree with what you guys have all talked about, what Jake, especially what you were saying about parent coaching. That's my go-to. If somebody wants me to see a child, I'll work with the parents. I don't work with kids. On principle, I just don't. I will work with older teens. And I see that as different. I also don't like the idea of the kid in the session for family therapy. I think that the authority needs to rest in the parents and that they need to sort out what's going on. And if they need to call in a professional or a consultant or coach or therapist in order to figure that out, great. And then they can bring that back to their family with authority. And that's the model that I like. But one final thought that I had was, when you do work with kids, what kind of attachment, and thinking about attachment theory, what kind of attachment are you forming where you have this really intimate connection with somebody that, like you mentioned, Jake, then goes on to spend the rest of their week far away from you without any ability for you to help them in any way at all. So you're supposed to lean in and really connect very deeply, but also I can never help you and we can never talk outside of this. So I think that in terms of an attachment figure, what on earth are we doing to little kids when they bond with a therapist?
Oh, centering ourselves on them, centering
That is
ourselves in their
so
life.
interesting. I've never thought about it that way.
Have you
Well,
guys
yes, and then you yank the kid out of therapy, or they just stop showing up, and that attachment figure is gone, and that's
It was
it's
commercial.
another trauma.
It was all
Yes,
transactional.
yes,
have you guys heard people defend keeping kids in treatment because I'm their only safe place? Have you heard that?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
right.
Oh,
We've
yeah,
all heard that.
that's terrible.
Yeah, so
yes.
it centers the therapist in their life, not the child in the therapist's life. We're the only medical profession that does this weird stuff too, by the way. Like you don't hear dentists talking like this. You don't even hear attorneys talking like this. Like they know their role. Like their role is to heal the sick. Ours is apparently to do some combination of healing the sick because we love the medical model until we don't because there's accountability
Right.
there because you have to hit a goal and then you got to get them off your calendar, right? And then we slide into coach slash I don't know tutor uh, mold, and it's like, yeah, there's a role for both, but you better be very clear about what role you're playing. And if I'm therapist, I analogize it to PT all the time, and I point over there because that's where my physical therapist office is. It's literally across the street. I go there because I'm wounded, right? And then I want to recover. And they bring me back to recovery to pre-wounded state. And then if I want to go get stronger, I go hire a personal trainer. And sure, the PT can do both, but that's not his job, right? That's not her job to be personal trainer. Her job is to nurture me back to pre-injury status.
Yeah.
And we have forgotten that. So we'll nest ourselves within the medical model because we love being associated with medicine because it makes us feel like important or something. But as soon as it comes time to discharge, we're like, whoa, no, 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 they need me. Whoa, you just created a dependent relationship, and that's highly unethical. But we don't talk like that, of course, right?
Yes.
So that's a big problem.
It's a huge problem. I was just talking with a couple of my therapist friends this weekend, about all this. And that very same word came up with a group that a friend of mine, colleague of mine, was supervising new interns, is the dependency. Well, they're dependent on me, so I can't let them go. And the organization, the agency supports that. Well, yes, because you are the only safe person, and because you are the only place that that kid has any kind of solace or comfort or love or attention. So absolutely, we're not discharging. I mean, it's such a different way of thinking than even what I was taught, I feel like, throughout the course of the profession. I really had to take a step back to see that dynamic, and to see that, you know, it maybe isn't the best for the kid,
How
to
are you,
be the one in therapy.
how are you supposed to teach boundaries if you can't have any of your own?
Absolutely. And that's a big issue.
Yeah, sure.
Stud
Text me anytime. I'll move my appointments around for
That,
you.
oh, well, all of a
I'll come
sudden,
to your house.
this is what's happening. Yes. And they are texting, and they are having a relationship with somewhat during the week in that regard.
But this is
And
the feminine. This is the feminine coming coming into step on the masculine. The masculine sets boundaries, it holds lines, it adheres to rules, it enforces things, right? The feminine moves all that aside to go, nurture and coddle and rescue and soothe and assuage. And we need both. We absolutely need both. I am not at all denigrating the feminine. I certainly have my own feminine side. I can rock my kids to sleep. I can dress their wounds. I can feed them when they're hungry. Like I have no problem with that. What I'm not going to do is invert the time, place, and manner by which I execute one or the other. And our whole profession has just thrown the masculine right out the window
yes,
to the point of we pathologize normal child behaviors too. Like little
yes.
Johnny isn't allowed to be aggressive at school. He's not even allowed to have aggressive thoughts, right? Let alone write them down on paper. You're like drawing axes and knives on the side, on the margins of his math sheet because he's bored because he got done with his math early. It's like, oh, we should probably have him evaluated. He's got violent tendencies, like, or he's a boy. Right, like we've over pathologized normal childhood development. That's another
Absolutely.
whole podcast, I
Yeah.
think. But
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
don't my brother had exactly that happen. Exactly that happened to him, and he was sent to the counselor for violent drawings. Now
Oh no.
he's a wonderful. He was never violent. He's a wonderful guy. He's athletic. He's a chief master sergeant in the Air Force. He's got 5 kids, and he's a painter. I mean, but as a little kid, there was too much violence in his drawing. So, there's the counselor entering his life.
right, to suppress, right, and to squish, and then to back to the original tee up of this conversation, like what's happening to men and women in their relationships, like that right there. That you've made the little child question himself to his core entity and his core being. Low thousands of years, millennia, we've been programmed to do certain things and act certain ways. Men and women are different, and they are compatible. They're compatible in their differences. We start squashing the differences. You end up with kids who grow into teens, who grow into adults who don't know who they are, and they're unanchored in any sort of reality. And then why do we have them grabbing for identities that don't make sense? It's because they
Mm,
need something. But when we're all untethered because we've become mirrored projective reflections in this funhouse of societal interaction, we're all just trying to be what we think the other person needs us to be ad infinitum. It's like, holy cow. And then add social media on top of it, where your neurological response to what you're seeing is people like me or people don't like me. If people don't like me, it tells my brain that my tribe is rejecting me. I better adjust so I stay in the tribe. And before you know it, you've
Mhm.
adjusted away everything that was yours. Like it's very bad. Like this is really pernicious. Heights, Jonathan Heights doing some great work. We need to pay heed to it. Or this is going to continue.
Mhm.
It's yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about the masculine tendency to set boundaries and hold them, a couple of thoughts came up, and I wonder what you guys think about this. It's like the feminine, and if you think about a father and a mother, for instance, the feminine instinct would be to find the exception. So, or to identify the exception, make exceptions, like, oh, he's not, he's 6 years old now. He shouldn't be coming into our bed at night. Oh, but
mhm.
he had a really bad nightmare, so those kind of, and there's a role for that it makes sense. There's a rule, like you said, there's a balance of that. But there's also in bureaucracy, going back to that, I don't know what to make of some of these contradictions. You can all probably picture the office lady at the school, or
Yeah.
the nurse at the reception who's just, I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't do anything about that. I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't do anything about that. These are the rules. We have to do the rule. And there's this refusal to identify the exception. And I don't know what to make of that, like archetypally.
It's so funny. I just have such a clear picture of those types when you said that. But then I'm also thinking about that book, In a Different Voice. I want to say it's by Carol Gilligan. I don't know if I have the name right, but she talks about how women are largely motivated by meeting needs. I mean, it's literally wired into us. So when we have decisions to make, we tend to make them on the basis of meeting needs. So we would be that one to say, oh, but he can't come in the bed because he had a nightmare. Oh, he's been afraid of the dark lately. So we are that person because we're looking at it as the highest thing to do is to meet needs and to nurture. And sometimes that runs amok. And I think that's why it's good to have the mother and the father because we balance each other out.
Mhm.
The the example you cite there of the person who refuses to bend the rules, I think if we're going to take this in context, I would say that on the whole, that's the exception. I don't think that's typical. I think we like to grab it because it is offensive, like it's rude. And I would say that the people who do that, male or female, are disordered in some way, shape, or form. They lack the basic empathetic understanding of like what's going on with the person who's making the request. Now, if you're a reasonable person, you're getting treated unreasonably, I would say that it's probably the person who's doing that is an unreasonable person. They'll fall somewhere in the personality disorder world, right? Because who does that? Who's a jerk all the time? Narcissists, right? So I would say that person's probably falling somewhere in that camp. If, however, there's you're the unreasonable person, right? Because and who would ever admit that? We have encounters like that all the time at the front desk here, where it's like, I demand you bend your policy to me. It's like, well, no, you're the
Hmm.
unreasonable person, right? And so we have to hold tight to the rules because if we, I mean, my good friend and mentor Christian Conti says, we always teach people uh, how to treat us, right? So if they're throwing a fit and slobbering at the mouth and flapping the arms, and I give into that, I've just taught them that that's okay. That's acceptable to act like that because then I'll break my own rule or I'll violate my own boundary. And everybody watching learns also that that's how you can treat me, and then I'll just give in. So I think that sometimes it's important to hold those rules, and you can do it kindly and firmly and compassionately, while still saying that's just the way it is, and we're not going to break. And if you can't explain that, you probably have some homework to do because I think intentionality matters as well. So I don't know that that's necessarily a an aberration of the masculine or the feminine standard. I think that's probably a person embodying man or woman who's just being a jerk, right? And that's a them issue. But what I will point out too, because you asked about the archetypal impact of this, all this stuff comes straight from object relations and from psychoanalytic theory, and they don't teach that anymore in grad schools. And my hypothesis is twofold. One, it can't be funded because it's not quote unquote evidence based because you can't run a 6 month trial to see if you can get somebody to stop smoking with their, rethinking or their skills or whatever and prove it. No, who cares what the fallout is down the road? We got them to stop smoking, right? No, don't measure the drinking, don't measure the anxious thoughts, don't measure the violence, just the smoking, right? Now we've got an evidence-based practice and we can teach that and we'll call it acronym of the week, right? And that'll go into the textbooks and that'll go into schools. Psychodynamic doesn't do that. It's much harder to track progress over time, but it does work. We know it works. There's lots of psychoanalytic people who will tell you that. The second angle is psychoanalysis requires an anchoring in something beyond self. The others don't. The BTs, the behavioral therapies, they don't necessarily require that. It just requires a reframing. And when you do that enough, you can just become God of your own universe. You can reframe everything. And how convenient is that, right? When you're trying to think your way through things, you go, it's not me, it's them. It's not me, it's them. It's not me, it's the sky, it's the system, it's my Sagittarius, right? It's anything but me. Psychoanalytic object relations requires a deep exploration of self and self accountability to that higher order and also fitting into society and what your role is in it. We can't have that if we're going to have the top-down authoritarian imposition of follow my rules and not yours, because individuals have to get squashed in the collective. They must. And psychoanalytic requires individual participation and individualism. So I think the twofold approach there is this social Marxist stuff coming through the universities, squashing individuality in conjunction with the actual monetary funding of behavioral sciences at the expense of existentialist psychotherapy, psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, object relations, all the deeper stuff. You can't CBT your way into meaning of life stuff. You just can't. But nobody's getting taught that, so we're all losing accountability. So I think there's more to it than just masculine, feminine, what's getting eroded. Feminine's under attack too, by the way. You're not allowed to be feminine either if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah.
Feminism is absolutely under attack. So, and why? I think because we have to crush the individual if we're going to allow the collective to spring forth and centralize authority. So feminine and masculine are both under attack. We're just centering on masculine because I'm the dude here to talk about masculinity, apparently.
I mean, I want to say one thing real quick about just the behavior models of therapy. I worked in addiction for quite some time. I worked inpatient and I also worked outpatient addiction. And they use a lot of CBT and behavior-based models to treat patients who have substance use disorders. And I think it can work in those scenarios because if the person, the trainer or the therapist, is able to confront the patient and talk about personal accountability and responsibility, that's what we used to do. That
Absolutely.
was that absolutely worked, and it was the only thing that actually got these people
Yep.
to become sober and to maintain some level. So I think in that scenario, um, but again, it goes back to the therapist and how they're implementing it. And if the
Yep.
therapist is doing the whole reframe everything and don't look at yourself, that's the issue. But personal responsibility and accountability are supposed to be kind of baked into that.
Yep.
And when it is, it's very effective.
Yeah, I didn't mean to come off like I'm pooping entirely
Oh
on
yeah,
behaviorism.
no,
If I didn't do behaviorism, I wouldn't be a therapist. It's more
sure,
that you don't necessarily get to the why. You can treat the
sure.
what for sure, but you don't necessarily get to the why.
That's
So that and I worry that the pendulum has swung too far that direction. That's all. And
yeah.
especially when managed care is behind it, saying ABA for autism and CBT for addictions and ACT for uh, more addictions and
Yes.
DBT for personality disorders. It's like, does anybody ever bother to ask why they got to where they are? Like, you
Hmm.
didn't emerge from the womb this way. We're not just time plus matter plus chance. We're people
Hmm.
with souls and minds and all sorts of deeper
Hmm.
stuff and values. Sorry,
Yeah,
cut off
I
there.
agree.
That's what I was wondering. I've been so I'm trained in DBT. I trained with Marsha Linehan. It was just we were sort of instructed to do that at one of my former workplaces. And I find DBT useful, but I feel like there's this giant elephant in the room with it because to me the borderline experience comes from such a primary wound. And all of these skills that people are acquiring, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, mindfulness, all of these things, yes, these are tools and this is useful, but there can still be, to me, the most destructive parts of borderline personality come from these very distorted thoughts that people are having. And I feel like DBT doesn't get under there and look at what are these thoughts and what are the roots of these thoughts.
I mean, I think people aren't in therapy long enough to do that in certain scenarios. I
Yeah,
mean,
you'd have to
because
really develop a very good
yes,
relationship
and
before you
it
can
has to
challenge
be
that.
Right, and it's got to be long term. I mean, if we're talking about managed care and medicalization, we're trying to get them through the system and out. So let's fix you, let's get you some new coping skills, and let's get out of
Yeah.
therapy, move on. We don't want to pay for anymore. And so because of that, I think I think it's such a multifaceted problem, but I do think that that component is also an issue where we're trying to rush people through because their insurance won't pay, or because we have client loads that we can't handle, or whatever the case may be. And people tend then to not be able to stay, either because they don't have the money to pay for it themselves, or they're not approved by their insurance to stay any longer. So I think that's part of why we can't get there. We can't get to those roots in the way that therapy was intended to address.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've altered our approach here at my company, so I now train my students, my interns, and my staff to go deeper faster because we're often time limited and we don't want to deal with PARs, but also PAR for the listening on prior authorization request. Um, we but I also say that, like, let's say you get your 12 sessions, right? Twelve sessions is a pretty standard thing. If you're working with Medicaid, it's like 26, which approximates half a year's worth of weekly psychotherapy. Now, on balance, I would say that is a lot of counseling if done properly. But I'll go back again. We have so many terrible clinicians that they're
Yeah.
just not doing good work. So they'll sit and be your friend, or they'll just reflect, 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 ask a question, reflect, 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 ask a question, right? And this is how they're taught. Or they'll teach coping skills as though that's some magic bean. So I'm teaching my folks to get in and treat problems, not symptoms. And I happen to, this is another unorthodox thing that I do. I view the entire DSM as a book full of symptoms. I don't care what the code is, it's a symptom. The problem is something that doesn't have an F code attached to it. It's something that's much more dynamic, much more nuanced, and much harder to ascertain. Something like doesn't know where one is going in one's life. Uh, Large trauma history. There's no code for that, right? Um, no idea who one is at one's core. Um, doesn't know how to tolerate emotions. Doesn't know emotional functioning at all, right? That'll give rise to symptoms like depressive disorders or anxious disorders or substance abuse disorders or identity crises or all sorts of the codable diagnoses. So I just say put the code down, put the treatment plan together so Anthem can see it, write your note to the treatment plan. But in session, you'd better be asking them a whole bunch of why questions, without eliciting defensive fight or flight, but asking them really thoughtful, deep, evaluative questions. Give them homework that's going to make them think about what the origin of this stuff is that they're dealing with. Because somebody comes in because they're drinking too much, I can cure the drinking. That's easy. Then anxiety pops up because they're using the drinking to mask the worry. And then we deal with the anxiety and depression kicks in because now they've exposed all the hopelessness that they've encountered. And then it's like we're playing therapeutic whack-a-mole. It's like, I just unplug
Mm-hmm.
the machine, man. Stop
Mm-hmm.
chasing moles. So I think there's a way to address this that doesn't allow us to, or maybe combats the notion that we have to play ball with the system that is corrupt and it is a racket and it is talk about centralizing power, man. The vertical integration of healthcare is going to ruin us all. But
Yeah.
we don't have to be complicit with that. I think 26 sessions is for most people is just a phenomenal amount of therapy. I think 12 is a
Mm-hmm.
lot, it done properly. And so we
Mm-hmm.
have to recalibrate what we're doing too. But I don't disagree that we don't spend enough time with our people. I also think that we don't spend enough time going deep or taking wild swings because they did enter into this contract. They want ostensibly to get help. So it's like I'll even preface it sometimes. I'll say, I'm going to put my real therapist hat on here and ask you a really tough question. So like I'm actually I guess mitigating some of the the defenses that I'm going to elicit. I'll go, boy, I wonder when you talk like that to other people, um, what their response is and what your role in it is. And it's like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
allowed to ask that to a domestic violence victim. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I am, because we all play roles. What was
Mm-hmm.
your role?
Mm-hmm.
You're blame shifting, right? It's like, no, no, I'm asking for accountability. But it's just trained out of us. We're not allowed to make
Mm-hmm.
people uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get growth and development is you got to push them into disequilibrium. But there's ways you can do it that aren't off-putting and insensitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
there's so
just broke
much
the
there.
internet apparently. So,
No, yeah, you broke the internet. When I was in graduate school for counseling, was you mentioned early on the that most graduates can hardly identify a modality that they resonate with or that they're going to work within.
yeah, they can't. That's not it though. They can't diagnose. They can't form a treatment plan.
Well,
Most of them can't even form a sentence.
I'm sure what I saw in my training was we had like a what was it called? Professional orientation or something like that. What was it called? Professional development sort of course. It was like, here's the profession, here's what it is. And so it was this one book, and it was pretty slim, and this is what the counseling profession is. And there was a chapter on the different modalities. Each one of them got like a 2-paragraph synopsis. And we were told to pick one, and then we were given like a multi-choice quiz to help us identify which one we kind of naturally aligned. It was very junk. It was like some internet quiz that you could have done and that was the only thing we ever did within modalities. That was the
Mm,
only information we ever got on modalities. Most of our diagnosis and treatment training was SMART treatment planning, the acronym
mhm,
SMART.
mhm,
And most of it was just put them into CBT, just use
mhm,
CBT.
mhm,
And so I felt like it was very mechanistic. It felt like we were being trained to be technicians, kind of picking from a drop-down menu, plug and chug with these smart treatment plans, give the insurance company something
That's
to
managed
to
care.
chew on, and that
Yeah.
was it. And there wasn't much about the deeper stuff. You should hate that you're white or don't be white in the first place. But there wasn't much depth in that process of learning
mhm,
about theoretical orientation and diagnosis. Very DSM heavy. It was really concerning. And at its core, it really felt like this is just a holding space until we can get AI to take over.
mm.
Because, we're just training technicians. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of want to
Yeah,
go somewhere else, but I'll save it.
I think that's accurate. I mean, and even when I was teaching, I didn't teach those kinds of classes, but I had students that were in those kinds of classes, and that's what they would talk about. And I think the one piece of advice I would give them is, okay, if you have to put something like that down on paper or whatever, put it on paper. But when you're in that room, that's where the work's happening. And this is the work that you need to do. And so I kind of, with Jake, sort of what you were saying earlier, and that's how I handled it. Um, I didn't, you know, dismiss the other professors, but I was very concerned. About the lack of being able to. My main concern, though, actually was the social justice ideology that crept
Mhm.
in. It felt like the teaching of theoretical orientations was sort of shadowed or masked by the social justice type ideology that took up most of the space in the classroom. And so I think that has a lot to do with it also. That's another component, is that they're the time they're supposed to be learning how to be therapists or about theory or about clinical orientation, they're talking about social justice.
Yeah, I missed a ton of that because I was in school 16 years ago.
Mm,
Um, and so it hadn't quite gotten its hooks in yet. What I did experience was in the cultural diversity class, the Sue and Sue book.
Mm.
I We were going over the typical quote unquote diversity demographics, which is sex, sexual orientation, gender, whatever that is, um, race, ethnicity, and that was pretty much it. And I had been cutting my teeth in the profession doing in-home work, paratherapy, I guess you could call it, psychosocial rehabilitation, basic skills training, and that's all Medicaid, and so it's the Medicaid demographic, and I'd been dealing with some pretty extreme poverty, dirt floor houses, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And I dared raise my hand and ask, "What about the culture of poverty?" And I got very sharply criticized for having the audacity to take the attention away from what really mattered, which was the plight of the non-whites. And And I was like, but this is a culture, right? I'm sitting there foolishly arguing out of naivety. I'm like, but it's a culture. Like poverty is a culture. It's irrespective of race. Like from my experience, right? There's a lot of poor brown people in Northern Nevada, and it was like the gears were stripping in the brains of the people in the classroom. There were a couple of like silent, tacit, nodding heads around me, but most of them were trying to figure out this conflict between me and a couple of the students and one of the proctors, and how I couldn't possibly get it as a white man, right? It's like, now, of course, I'm teaching, of course, we're out of time, but I'm teaching cultural competence courses in firearms culture, which is definitely a culture. And then there's subcultures within that. There's law enforcement culture, and there's corrections culture, and there's
Hmm.
dispatch culture, and EMT culture, and hospital culture. And like there's tons of cultural stuff, religions, and then sects within religions. And Gerald Wing Sue didn't bother to write any of those chapters, though. So that tells you a lot about the motif that's emerged in the last 15 years since I graduated and how justice oriented, whatever justice, I hate adjective justice too. It's like justice is justice is justice. We don't need to slap adjectives in front of it. Environmental justice and social justice and economic justice. I'm like, shut up. Just do the right thing. That's what justice is. Um, so it's now become the centerpiece of our profession, which apparently is the epicenter of this movement, probably because we're soft-hearted and we want to help people and we love, deconstructing things, and deconstruction has its purpose. Postmodernism has its purpose in thinking skills, as far as getting somebody to be less rigid in their binary thinking. Like it's a great thought experiment to be like, hey, let's live in the gray for a little while. Problem is, you can't live in the gray forever. You have to
Hmm.
declare something at some point. Otherwise, you're going to go truly crazy. Too many options.
Hmm.
No, that's a great anecdote around the Sue book and the way it was taught. I'm glad you escaped the heaviest part of the social justice indoctrination in your program, but that's pretty bad already right there. It reminds me of the Biden quote, poor kids are just as good as white kids, wasn't it? Something like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's
Open mouth, insert foot.
yeah.
I
Oh,
love that. That's hilarious.
oh,
Yeah.
hello, doggy.
Dog
That's
kisses.
awesome.
But yeah, yeah, I wondered about this in my own program, how so many people just spoke about it was like you had to mention your privilege and you had to be sorry for it. You had to do that when you talked about in our multicultural studies, and it was a constant refrain. I know my privilege, my privilege, my privilege. And I wondered why so many people ate this up. And I think that there is a big block of white middle class people who do buy this stuff, who do feel. And I grew up poor, and I know that poverty is its own culture. I know, it's not, this was I remember having this debate with this guy who was I worked at a bar when I was 18. No, I guess I was 20. 1920. 1920. Yeah.
1920.
19 or 20. Not in 1920. I am not quite that old yet. But
Pre-prohibition.
I worked in this bar, and it was this kind of this little a nice place down in St. Paul Square in San Antonio, where a lot of bigwigs went, city council people and businessmen and stuff. And I used to have this debate with this one wealthy Mexican businessman about affirmative action. And we would always debate racial affirmative action. He was a really nice guy, really tolerated all of my obnoxious youth. And I said, make it based on income. If you disproportionately impact or positively impact people of color, great, that's no problem. But it should be income based if we're going to have affirmative action. It should be based on poverty, because that is, and that seems to be the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. You want to talk about race instead.
Hmm.
But you know what? I've enjoyed this conversation. It reminds me of how we used to flow, where we'd flow in and out of several topics in 1 hour instead of focusing on just one. And Jake, I appreciate you bringing that like big curiosity to the conversation, the big intellect energy.
I've never I've never heard that before. I've never been accused of such a thing, but I'm going to take that as a compliment because it feels like one.
Yeah. Well, tell people where they can find you if they're curious to get to know more of your work.
Yeah, we didn't really get into the guns and mental health thing, but there's a great organization called Walk the Talk America that I'm a part of. It's a 501(c)(3), and we are bridging the gap between firearms ownership and mental health care. It's a chasm that's more or less been self-imposed for many years between these two cultures. And what we're doing is training practitioners how to be more savvy about what firearms culture is and the many diverse aspects therein. And then also training gun owners to be less suspicious of counseling so that they can get help. Because it really, at our core, we're a suicide prevention organization, but we're a pro Second Amendment mental health organization that's trying to get upstream from just simple suicide intervention and teach people how to be well and stay well so they don't slide into that place of despondency. So Walk the Talk America, WTTA.org is the website. There's free and anonymous mental health screenings. They're powered by Mental Health America, so they have good high fidelity. You can see some of the research that we've pulled about stigma that hits both of these cultures. You can, if you're a firearms person, you can download some of the slides that we have for firearms instructors. You can see the work that we're doing with Kids to Kings, which is urban inner city youth, teaching them firearms responsibility and mental health awareness. When I say urban inner city youth, read Black children in Atlanta, which is where the pilot program is. And then the podcast called Guns and Mental Health, available wherever podcasts are found. So that's what I plug. And then my own agency is called Zephyr Wellness. It's ZEPHYR wellness.org. And we've got a YouTube channel. It's got one guy on it. It's got me, but we have a YouTube channel. And I have my pride and joy is the emotional functioning video series that I do, where I teach, because we don't get this curriculum anywhere. We sort of brush up against SEL, but we spend way more time on the S than the E. And when it's done poorly. So I have a whole series of videos on the 10 core emotions as researched by Carol Izzard. You can find those on the website. And I want to get this stuff out because I say very frequently that I'm trying to work myself out of a job because, therapist is not my identity. Therapist is my job. I do it well. I'm passionate about it, but I create a lot of free stuff so that people don't have to keep coming through my door. And if we can cure mental illness, then I will gladly do literally anything else to pay my bills. So zephyrwellness.org, you can read stuff and watch stuff and listen to stuff. And then Noggin Notes. Noggin Notes is my other podcast. Leslie's going to be on it here shortly. That's a mental health only podcast I've been having for several years now. So.
Well, everybody wants you back. I've seen lots of comments in the chat. Enjoyed you very much having you in the stream today. And I'll include, after I get this updated, usually takes me a couple of hours, but this afternoon I'll get this stream updated with all the information on where you can find Jake and his links. So thanks everybody for watching. We're going to go off the record now and have a longer extended discussion with Solid Ground members. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. We'll look forward to seeing y'all on Monday of next week.
Thanks, everyone.